Well, welcome back. Today I am going to be speaking to a topic that I think most people would have some experience dealing with. I have certainly, over the many years of my life, I have come across this challenge, and it hasn't always been so easy to get through or to get past or to get around the issue. The topic has to do with how you can go about achieving a goal you have, or how to get things done in your life, whether that be personal or whether that be professional. What I intend to do is to share a number of ideas. I'll rattle them out as they come along, and obviously, as you can imagine, they won't be exhaustive, but I think some of them could be of great utility and great value. Now let me start by saying the following. Think of yourself as a unique individual, which you certainly are, whether you're male or female, irrespective of your gonads, irrespective of the pigmentation of your skin. You are special. Let's begin with that. You are the highest form of creation. You are the highest form of what could have been possible. All there is and all that there could be is housed within your body. Human beings are special. We're unique. We have attributes that make us different from each other. But strategically speaking, the potentiality exists in every one of us. And how we channel that greatness is to each person. As the saying goes, to each their own. So start with the perception and the outlook that you have greatness within, that you have something special, that the seeds of what is good and what is great and what is God resides in you, and that seed can blossom into anything you want it to be. The point of this being that you are only limited by your imagination, and you're only limited by yourself. Now, as part of the process of thinking about how to get things done in your life, it's important to understand that we as individuals, we occupy what I call 3 levels of our personality. We live in 3 levels of understanding. We are made in such a way that there are 3 parts to our uniqueness. Think of water. Water can be in different forms: liquid, vapor or gas, and solid. At different temperatures, water changes its state. It's still water, but it's designated by different names and has different properties. You and I, we're physical beings, or rather we're spiritual beings. We live in a physical body, we have a mind. So we occupy 3 levels to our personality: spiritual, physical, and mental slash emotional, or the metaphysical. Now, with that said, the question is, okay, how do you go about getting things done in your life? Now, the reason I started with this distinction is to make you aware that possibilities are boundless in your imagination, in your mind. Possibilities are also limited by your physical personality. Possibilities are infinite on the spiritual level. So the first part of understanding how to get things done is recognize the role that each part of you plays. For example, if you're 5'1", and you want to be 7 foot so you can play basketball, although you might have that desire spiritually and mentally and emotionally, there are physical limitations. Now, there are ways to get around, over, through, under those obstacles. And I will, in the next few minutes, talk on to some of those ways that you can make do with what you have. And let's begin, without any further ado. The first is for you to outline the intended objective. Let me rephrase. Outline the intended outcomes or the intended results. I make a distinction between objectives and goals for a reason. But also I make a distinction between goals and outcomes because they're not the same. Every single day, people achieve their goals. The goal is what you want to do. People achieve their goals. They attempt those goals. Very few achieve the intended outcome. So the first way to get things done is follow the principle of beginning with the end in mind. Stephen Covey, in his profound book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, talked about a concept that you begin with the end in mind. That concept is not Stephen Covey's alone. Throughout the books of antiquities, particularly biblical studies, the idea permeates the entire doctrine. In other words, the divine begins from the end, then he comes back to the beginning and he starts the journey. In other words, go to the end, identify the outcomes you want, the results you expect to have. Once you've identified those obstacles, then you come back to where you are and begin the journey towards that end. It's a fascinating concept. Human beings can do this because we have an imagination. So we can sit here and we can dream. We can visualize. We can paint a picture of what the end will be. Or we can actually simply ask the question. So in relation to getting things done, let's use an example. You work in an office, you work and you report to someone senior to you. There's a task that falls within your responsibilities as an employee. Every day, most people come to work and they confuse, they mistake their activity, working from 9 till 5, for productivity, which often only requires a fraction of the entire day. People are busy doing nothing. The reason being, they are working on their goals. They're not working towards the outcomes. So in this case, outline the required results. And sometimes you do not have to come up with that process or those answers alone. Go up to your supervisor and get some guidance. What do you expect me to produce? Wrong question is always, what do you expect me to do? That is the wrong question, which is why most people are dissatisfied with their supervisors and supervisors are dissatisfied with their subordinates. The question should always be, what do you expect me to produce? Not what do you expect me to do? Now that's the first step. Outline the required outcomes and results. Now the second, and I think this is where the journey begins, is identify the limiting steps, the key limiting steps on that path, or what I call the key risks. Now let me use a different example. Let's say you've been given a description of the intended results. Between where you are and those results, there are obstacles that you have to face. But all obstacles are not created equal. There are very important pivotal obstacles that change the trajectory of your direction. You see, we move in the directions that we face. If we face this way, we move that way. If we face the other way, we move that way. But if you're careful enough to choose the direction you face and you choose the destination, then what you then have is that your destination will be predetermined by your direction. And therefore, if you stay focused in the right direction, you can identify the obstacles along that path. There is no need identifying all the obstacles along all the various paths. Effectively, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. However, when you're trying to achieve a task, you might have to squiggle. It's never a straight line. But whatever path you choose, believing and understanding that there are several paths to that goal, whatever path you choose, whatever direction you face, whatever destination you've identified, stay on that lane. Now, let me give you a good example of what I mean by this. Let's say I was on Newbourne Street in central London, in Mayfair. And let's assume that you, on the other hand, you were in Richmond, southwest London. If I asked you how to get from Richmond to Mayfair, there is not one and only one route. There are several ways. There are several ways to get to the center of the city, or to the center of the town, or to get to Newbourne Street. But one of those routes will get you there with the least amount of obstacles, the fastest pathway, the fastest time. So recognize that there are several paths that you can take to get to that outcome. But first of all, identify the right pathway and the limiting steps along that pathway. Now, once you've done that, number 3 is to make a list of all those steps. Make a list of all those steps. The way the mind works, the mind is very creative. The mind will come up with every single thing that could go wrong. Your role is to discipline the mind, like you would a horse. Once you've identified the limiting steps, you make a list. The point of making the list is so that you can prioritize those items on the list based on urgency and importance. Not all things are urgent, not all things are important. Many years ago, I explained the concept of thinking about a quadrant. And in the quadrant you had non-urgent, non-important, non-urgent, important, important, non-urgent, urgent and important. I hope I've got this right. The point being to always focus on what is urgent and important. Now that checklist you've prepared, once you've identified the list, you can rank order each of those items according to priority. But here's the key. According to priority, but also according to the path towards the goal. There is no need working on obstacle number 10 when you haven't resolved obstacle number 1. Think about it like the video games that you play. You find the key, you get through the first door, you find the next key, you get to the second door, you find the third key, you get through the third door. There is no need for you to have the key to door number 10 when you haven't found key to door number 1. So prepare, step 4, prepare a checklist. A checklist that you get to check off. Door number 1, door number 2, door number 3, door number 4. That checklist is simply your priorities, your list in sequence, in more or less a chronological fashion, as though you're taking a journey. Once you've prepared the checklist, you need to assign, this is key, you need to assign a time schedule for each of the items on the checklist. Most people waste a lifetime trying to build a life. Whereas if they simply had prepared and they had a checklist and they understood what they were doing, all they needed to do was live a day, create one good day and repeat it every day and course correct every day. You don't need to create the life. One journey at a time, one step. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. The point of the checklist is to tell you to take just one step. The reason you need this checklist is so you can check things off. The reason you need a time schedule is because complacency is often what holds people back from leading a life that they deserve or from experiencing the life that they have imagined. We over prioritize being lazy, being distracted, and therefore we don't have a schedule. Now let me give you a practical way of thinking about how this would work. You have your checklist of 10 items. You identify that each item requires 2 hours. You come to work at 9 in the morning. You sit down at your desk at 9:30 in the morning. You know you have 2 hours to get through checklist number 1. You set your time clock, head down, you work. You turn off your mobile phones before you begin so that you're not distracted. And for 2 solid hours, you simply work. You work until you get to the end of that checkpoint. You check it off. You take a break. Now, automatically you've achieved the first milestone. You have the key to door number 1. Door number 2 awaits. So the point of this is that every day, as you work towards your goal, as you work towards the desired outcome or results, you check things off. You work from a plan. That plan is your checklist. You're not working based on feelings, and you're not working based on being a free spirit. You're not working based on being creative. No, you're disciplined, you're focused, and you have a checklist. Now, once you've done the preparation of the checklist, this brings you to item number 5, which I have already alluded to, which is take action. Take action. Take that step. Just take a plunge. 5 simple items. Number 1, identify your intended outcomes or the results. Make an outline of what you want to achieve. Number 2, identify the limiting steps that would maybe stop you from getting to that place. Make a list of all the steps in a chronological sequence, in an order based on priority, based on urgency, based on importance. Take that information, put it into a checklist, into what I call a to-do list. Next to each item, recognizing that you have already prioritized them. So there's an order of preference, an order of priority, but for each item on that checklist, put a timeline. 10 items, the first might be 2 hours, the second might be 30 minutes, the fourth might be 3 days, the fifth might be an hour, 45 minutes. The point being, put a checklist. And once you put on your checklist a time frame, what I used to do back in the day was I always put a C and an A next to each of this checklist. The C was what I call my created time. So if I anticipated that it would take 2 hours, I would put next to C, I would put 2 hours. Once I've achieved that task, once I've completed that task, I would put next to A, because A represented achieved. I would put next to A the actual time it took. So if it took me 3 hours, I would put next to A 3 hours. The point of this being that at the end of the day, or at the end of the week, when I reviewed the work I had done, I was trying to understand the process of planning, creating a workflow, understanding perhaps why I performed more efficiently in some tasks, why I performed less efficiently in other tasks, what my blind spots were, what I did not efficiently plan for. I also wanted to identify when I was distracted, how much the distractions around me caused in relation to that task. And then number 5, take action. Now, what I've described in many ways, we go back to where we started this conversation, and I said we live in 3 levels in our personalities: spiritual, physical, emotional. And next to the emotional is the mental. Let me emphasize that the 5 items I have shared so far are primarily to do with taking action, which is physical. Yes, there is an element of using your intellectual faculties to create and to plan, but it's primarily a result of activity, which is the lowest level of your personality, which is physical. Now let me transcend to the second, which is your mental, metaphysical, emotional state. Now every one of us has a mind. We've been gifted with, unlike the animal kingdom, most animals operate by instinct. They have what we call a code in their genetics, a genetic code, which is why a newly born lamb within a few minutes can be running with the rest of the herd. Human beings do not have that, but we have a mind. We have the free will. We have what we call intellectual faculties, really, that enable us to create our emotional state. Some of the intellectual faculties we have: imagination, perception, reason, will or willpower, memory, focus. All of these are some of the intellectual faculties we have. Now let me give you an example of how this works. The way you use your intellectual faculties determines your emotional state. And similarly, the way you use your emotions can cause you to use your intellectual faculties differently. But generally speaking, your intellectual faculties of the mind influence your emotions. So if you imagine, like if I asked you to shut your eyes and think about someone, if you are a lady, imagine someone giving you a red rose, and I ask you to smell, in your imagination, smell the rose, and describe what the rose looks like. In a short few seconds, you're creating in your imagination a feeling, though not real, in your imagined state, changes your emotions. So you start to associate that picture you have in your mind with perhaps a memory from the past. So you've activated 2 parts of your intellectual faculties, your imagination and your memory. Fascinating. That would change your emotional state. So in the few minutes I have left with you, let me talk about how your emotions play a part in you achieving the goals you want. And to do that, it's important to understand the concept of energy, emotions, and expectations. 3 E's. Expectations create emotions. Emotions create energy. Expectations create emotions. Emotions create energy. Now, the reason I think this is fundamentally important is most of you who have been listening so far would have agreed that the 5 items I listed at the start were things you already know. Your intuition reminded you that these are not new ideas, these are not new truths, these are things you know. So for many people, like I used to feel the same way, the issue was not knowing what to do. The issue was the motivation, the energy. to do what I knew how to do. So in order to get things done, you need to combine the physical ability with the emotional ability. So we continue with the numbering system. Number 5 was take action. Number 6 is identify the feeling that you would like to feel once you've achieved the outcome. Sounds rather trivial. I have found it to be incredibly powerful. Now, everything we do in life is for a feeling. Fascinating. Everything we do in life is for a feeling. We are either pursuing pain or trying to avoid, rather, we're either pursuing a gain or we're trying to avoid pain. We're either moving towards a feeling or we're moving away from a feeling so that we create a different feeling. So number 6 is identify the feeling you wish to have once the objective, once the outcomes, and once the results have been achieved. Now, number 6 comes from Tony Robbins, which I have to say, the personal development industry over the last 10 years has, there's been a break in, you might say, the baton. Tony Robbins was very influential and a very inspiring and a very wise man, who was the successor from some of the pioneers of the personal development industry from the 70s and pre-70s, leading up to the 80s and 90s, which was when Tony Robbins began his teaching and his mentoring calling. But Tony Robbins said something that has always stuck with me, and he said, motion creates emotion. And similarly, emotion will create motion. A good way of explaining how this works is think about this. I know most of you would agree with this, that there have been times when you feel lethargic, you're not motivated, you're tired, maybe you're depressed, you're sad, you're just not feeling particularly excited. A call comes in, perhaps the call comes from a friend, someone you know, a loved one, a friend, a family, or an unexpected call, a job application you put forward, never heard back for weeks, believe that you were not selected. Out of the blue, the call comes through. You're told, congratulations, we have made our selection. We want you to start working in the company in 2 weeks' time. We're sending you the paperwork, the salary you wanted will be paid, and we look forward to having you. We're sorry we hadn't got back to you, but the process of selecting the right candidate took much longer. Suddenly, your mood changes. Excitement comes back into your life. Why? A thought changed the feeling you had in mind. See, what you see, what you hear, determines what you think. And how you think determines how you feel. How you feel will control the actions you take. So emotion creates motion. Now, the opposite of that is there are times when you know you have to go for a workout. You for some reason you're able to get yourself to get to the gym. You walk into the gym, you don't feel too strong, motivated, but then the song in the background is your favorite song, and suddenly you're ready to go. Or even when you go to the club, a beat gets you going. Motion creates emotion, and emotion can create motion. Now that's number 7. Use the concept of motion creating emotion to your advantage. Now number 8, this is where I slowly come to a close, is the power of expectation. We're very good at deciding, knowing what we have to do. we're very poor in the art of expectation. When we set goals, when we say our prayers, when we make our wishes to the universe, we do so seldomly with the power of expectation. In other words, believing and expecting good things to happen as a result of the task that you have completed. So for every task you're about to do, what are your expectations? And the expectations should not be about completing the task. The expectations should be about the benefits that come as a result of doing something productive. A pat on the shoulder from your boss, a potential promotion in the future, recognition in the team, praise and love from your partner, looking much better physically and therefore getting so much applause and good comments from people who see your new physique. You need to understand how to use the gift of expectation. Now, once you've done all of that, and let's just assume you did all the items I've suggested really well, one thing will happen: you're not going to be right 100% of the time. But, I've said in many sessions before, you don't always have to be right. You just simply have to be less wrong than you initially expected. And this simply means you have to learn how to review the work you've done. Identify things you've done well, identify things you could have done differently, and take that feedback. Introspection, review, plus feedback equals progress. I hope that's been useful.